Hello, and welcome to another video. This video, kind of just going to be talking. We're not really going to talk about anything crazy. There are going to be two hatred games in the background. Hatred is definitely one of my favorite specs to play at the moment, and there's nothing too interesting about either of these games, so I felt, you know what, why not just put them together and talk a little bit, because there are some things that have come to mind that, you know, I just haven't done that many commentaries, let alone talk to you guys about a lot of things. And I've made some videos about guides and whatnot, so that's me talking, but also at the same time I did make that one video where I did commentate about the state of PvP. Basically this isn't like a continuation of that video, but rather talking about some of that stuff, I guess. Not a direct continuation, I guess you could say, but it's going to be talking about that and other things at the same time. So for those that have never played Hatred, I'm just going to explain some things real quick for you. I do have a guide for this, so if this gameplay looks interesting or you just wanted to play it or give it a try and you're wondering like, man, how are you doing so much damage? Well, I've got you covered. I only do have a guide on that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to help. And to do a quick rundown of basically what I'm doing is that my 3 and 4, one's called Creeping Terror, the other one's called Discharge. Those are my 2 dots. My button on 6 is called Assassinate. It used to do a lot of damage, and it used to be your auto crit. That was with old set bonuses. Those old set bonuses are gone now, so the game has come a long way since. Then we have on 2 and 5. 2 is Lacerate. This is what you would do whenever you have AoE. It also spreads your dots. It does not spread the dot that's on C, just the dots on 3 and 4. Death Field will increase my periodic damage by 15% for each death mark that I have on the target. Obviously, when dots tick, it consumes death marks. I'm running the 1 second Eradicate, and the reason why I'm running the 1 second Eradicate is because it gives me more burst damage, and it also just allows me to have the chance of my Demolish, I guess, not falling off, or Eradicate. I don't know which one they call it at this point. It got reworked like 3 different times because they put Crushing Darkness into it, and then they also put Shock into it. It used to just be Crushing Darkness. Then I think it was Eradicate. I can't remember. It's one of them. Basically, they changed the name like twice on it. But originally it started out as Crushing Darkness, and that was that. It's definitely a lot better than what it used to be. But the reason why I'm taking 1 second is because it increases my burst, but also it doesn't fall off. Eradicate is a relatively longer dot, or Demolish. Forgive me, I might say that multiple times. Okay, there we go. You get a kill message. This is Eradicate. So it's called Eradicate. I'll try to make sure that I get it right every single time. So what you'll see is that I'm running the Shadowcraft implant, which gives me 100% critical rate after I use a Phantom Stride from Stealth. So when you do like an opener, let's say from Stealth with Phantom Stride, you would drop a Death Field, which would be an AoE auto crit with internal damage. It would also apply Death Field to everybody that hit by it, and obviously Death Mark, so that's huge. And then you can go immediately into Recklessness to increase the damage of your next ability, and on top of that, it stacks with 100% crit, so it's more damage. And go immediately into Eradicate, which would be proc from Phantom Stride, which will do over 100k. You'll see it in the video here, where sometimes I'll do it, and you'll see a whole bunch of like 10, 11,000 ticks. That's instant Eradicate, and it absolutely melts people. It also goes through Reflect, which is pretty nice, as it is still a dot and rightfully should. It's just very dangerous for those classes that rely on Reflect. For example, Mercenary, trying to get its heals. Hatred is really good at killing them. Then it does lower our healing from Legion Strike, but honestly, Legion Strike most of the time goes unused unless you're single targeting. The main reason for that is that your CDR for Recklessness, if I'm getting that right, Yeah. That's what I'm thinking about. Okay, so when your CDR is going for recklessness, you're going to be not really able to use maximum usage for the chain strike, and it costs a lot. And you're never going to be able to have 3 dots on the target to have it be somewhat net positive. And because of that, most of the time it's just going to be better to use Thrash or Lacerate. Anything to get your dots ticking and more dots on more people. I'll give you more CDR. More CDR means more death field. More death field just means more damage overall. And it also means more lifesteal, which is nice. As for our defensive cooldowns, V, it's my AoE taunt. That gives me damage reduction when I pop it. However, it's not very much damage reduction. The class is light armor, and it's very much so a glass cannon. So if you are, again, interested in playing this, probably don't do that. And the other implant that I run is Second Wind. The reason why I run Second Wind is for the mobility and the healing. Mobility is the main reason I take it, because this class with good mobility is very, very nice. Getting your dot spreads, very much so important to have some decent mobility to make sure that you always get in the position to do it. It also gives you good chase, and having good chase is dot spec. Not necessarily as important, but it does help you position better to avoid incoming damage. You'll see me a lot in this video. I'll randomly get behind things just to make it harder for the range to pelt me down, basically. Then the extra healing from it is incredibly nice, and compare that with the actual lifesteal that I do get. It ends up being just a little bit of a decent amount of healing against people that aren't able to do much damage to me. It ends up being enough to usually keep me healthy. And if I'm able to get kills, it will make me healthy a lot of times. However, whenever I'm taking direct damage that is relentless, the only option I really have is either dying or using Force Cloak. I don't like to use Force Cloak as a defensive. I like going back around the corner and regenning. I don't like any of that, so I usually use it defensively all the time. I'm more of a assassin player that just doesn't prefer the stealth, just like Lethality. I don't prefer the stealth. It's a mechanic, right? But you're not participating in the match at all. From my point of view, you are not doing anything at all when you're in stealth other than defending. And if you're not in a position to defend, you're not even doing that. They're virtually useless. You're not doing anything. And I don't like that. I like to have a large impact. I like to play that way. That's just the way I play. And here you can see the opener. I'm creating distance here and rooting him there so he can't get closer to knock me back. If he knocks me back, it does apply a slow to me. I don't really want to get slowed because I want to save my force speed. Unfortunately, the APPT is on me, so I lose a crap ton of health, and I'm pretty much doomed, right? But this is kind of how PvP is nowadays, which is something else I want to talk about. Again, as I said, an intro of this video. None of these games are really that great, at least from my point of view. They're very boring. Just going through the motions for the most part. Which I guess is probably what most people are doing at this point. A lot of people are here just for rewards. A lot of people that just don't have gear, still gearing, or they're just doing it for the sake of PvP. I know there's a lot of people out there that still enjoy PvP, but there's also a lot of people that are just doing it for rewards. And it's really hard sometimes to differentiate between those players. So if you guys are curious, let's say you're not very much into combat and or really understand the game yet or have that much gear, one thing I would like to express here is that I have a guide on gearing, 100%. Figure out your gear, understand why you go for what you do, and don't fall for the trap of, oh, I need 336 gear and I don't want to grind it out. You don't need 336 gear, you need 332. You can go 336, it's not necessary. The difference between 336 and 332 is 2 tertiary stat, which isn't a big difference. You also lose 1 power going for 336. You might have varying results. Everyone might have that. So for example, if you're playing a tank, your stats will be slightly different. Tanks actually get slightly more mastery or power. I can't remember which one it is. And then for healers, I think they also have the same issue. But it's only by like 1 or 2 points. It's not something crazy. But when it's DPS, same DPS compared from 336 to 332, the only difference if you're running the exact same build is the difference of 2 critical and losing 1 power. So for the most part, level sync works correctly. And it's not necessary to go out of your way and get 336. Also, if you do not have purple earpiece, that'll be obviously a problem because anything that's not purple ends up being HP focus, and HP focus means that you'll be getting more HP and less power, less mastery, and less secondary stat. And level sync actually does take that into account, which is why people in green gear have like almost no power. There's virtually no bolster anymore, so getting your gear right is very important. If you have any questions on gearing, feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to help. And then going forward into, yes, knowing how to move around the map, I do have a lot of short videos where I showcase a lot of the shortcuts in the game, especially on all these maps. For example, on this map, you can get through the gate over here on defender side. If you're body type 1, you can squeeze through it. It's very helpful for sorcerers and some other classes. Also makes it really hard for somebody to chase, especially if they're not body type 1. They can't chase you. If you're slowed as you're trying to make the shortcut, you're going to have to use something to purge, either cleanse or use some movement speed buff, and it'll be a little easier to fit through. Now, as for the PvP and the state of PvP as a whole, as I was mentioning earlier, it more than needs help. I'll be honest. So the removal of ranked, I don't know how to put it. It does hurt the game, right? But I do think it was the right idea. And the reason why I think it's the right idea is because it had so low of activity. Not only did the matchmaking not work for multiple seasons in a row, there's a lot of cheaters that went unpunished. After season 12, there was many cheaters that never got punished. Virtually no bans basically went out in season 13, season 14. I believe even in like season 13 or season 14, top 3 titles went to random people for almost no reason. And then the reasoning was nobody claimed to be ranked titles. Well, if you're going to start doing that, in season 12 was the same thing. You had 1 requirements too, but those top 3s went unclaimed. So much so that I believe, at least for season 12, which was very competitive, there was only a handful of gold players from season 12 to see in the season 12 gold flare, unless it was on a very strong spec at the time. It's pretty rare. You don't see them very often. You'll see them probably about as often as you see a top 3, depending on the spec, which is interesting to think about. Getting elo was harder, and I streamed a lot during that time, and I did my best to try to revive the ranked community and get a lot of people playing. It worked for the most part. Obviously, I wasn't the only one that was streaming and doing that, and obviously we all piggybacked off each other and made things better, which was great. But ultimately, I didn't play season 13. I didn't care about season 13. Season 12, the end of season 12, there was a big fiasco, which is probably the reason why, some people don't want to play. It was the first season I ever took seriously in terms of like solo ranked, because it felt like solo ranked was always RNG and it didn't feel fun to play. And on top of that, all the classes that I would play would just get stalemated by people that just sit there and heal themselves for the entire match rather than actually using the brain to play. I know some people are like, oh, this game is survival. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Obviously, because I play the specs that don't have that great of survivability. Which naturally favors operative. It's a big one. Sorcerer and mercenary. Those classes that I just don't care for. Operative, at least in season 12. Lethality. I had a lot of experience on lethality going into that, but it was considered when I first started playing to be a troll pick, not a good pick, and not something you should really play in ranked. I obviously proved a lot of people wrong. And then obviously people were like, oh wow, virulence is actually insane. Never mind, it's not a troll pick anymore, which is great. But regardless of that fact, it doesn't change that obviously population is dwindling. If it takes just one person to change the opinion on one class or one spec, it goes to show that there's just not enough players playing. You can never get a matchmaking system to work correctly if there's not enough players. You can look at Guild Wars 2. There's not enough ranked players in Guild Wars 2 that the top 1% or whatever is like as low as I think platinum, I think, for that game, which is not the highest rank. There's a lot of other games that also have this issue, and it's just matchmaking just won't work. It just can't. What they needed to do for ranked to actually work is, one, punish people who cheated. Ranked ban was the cool, I guess, ideal. But it was basically almost abused. There was a lot of people that got reset even, which I know some people were like, oh, well, that's not a big deal, blah, 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 or they'll flex that they're achievement. Oh, like, oh, I went from 0 rating to 1200, and I already know people are going to think that I'm thinking of Scooby. It's not aimed at him, I swear. He just happens to be somebody that did it, and he's not the only one. So when you get reset, it's because they found that you were cheating, or something was very suspicious, so they reset you. What I think should have happened is that they should just get ranked banned. And then obviously they would have to be very, very confident in what they were doing, whether he was cheating or not, it doesn't matter. But they would be confident, so you could trust them. But that's not what happened. They got reset, and depending on like how decent you are at the game, being reset is actually an advantage. So it allows you to go on a crazy win streak. When there's win requirements to, let's say, get top 3, let's say if you're going for top 3, if there's a win requirement, you're able to go on a massive win streak to get your rating back. And then when you start pushing for rating, you probably have majority of the wins already, if not all of them. They're probably pretty close. Win requirements was basically the worst thing that possibly could have happened for this game in regards to keeping it competitive, because it promotes a lot of throwing, and that's not good. Throwing is not good. It made throwing more relevant. It's very common too, which is, again, another reason why people didn't want to play ranked. On top of, just not being prepared for it. I think the arena queue is a great tool for people to learn, but if we're ever to get ranked back, we need the PvP population to grow. So for the casual player experience, the new player experience needs to be improved. Everybody is too busy yelling at each other. Everybody's too busy cursing in chat and calling people idiots. Even though, a lot of people that are doing it are the ones that are just not contributing and expect a free carry. You're not going to win every single game. And if you go into thinking that you're going to win every game, you might as well just not even play. It's natural that you're supposed to, in PvP, run into opposition. That's just how it is. It's the whole nature of PvP. It's player versus player. It's just to fight other people. If nobody's fighting, it's not really PvP anymore, is it? So again, with there's a sorcerer there too, by the way. I want nothing to do with that, and I'm hoping that I don't get hit by chain lightning, and I almost did. Thankfully, I'm pretty sure he was running the halted defense, so we're fine. Oh yeah, and that where you saw a bunch of 10k hit splats there, that was the recklessness eradicate during the 100% crit window. That's a massive ability. But generally, the ideal of ranked is a very, very toxic one, but also personally jaded for me because the seasons I did try, there was at least, I'm going to say like maybe eight total top 3 titles that were completely removed from the game from win traders. They had a title and then they got it removed afterwards. Regardless of my position on it, that's something that's consistently happened over season. I personally wasn't going for top 3, but it did happen to be in spot 4. So the top 3 that I got on Vanguard, not only did I play placements, I played only when SF would actually pop. And it was probably because people would try to dodge. They wouldn't play main tunes, they wouldn't queue if they knew that we were in queue. So obviously group rank did seem not very many people wanting to actually face opposition, but rather just easy wins, which obviously you see from, well, you can't see it anymore because leaderboards are gone, but season 12, the ratings of certain people, and then season 13, the ratings of certain people. Like a 2,000 rating difference. It's not normal. But getting into that whole ordeal, people just not wanting to play because they don't feel it's fair, or the players shouldn't get into it. Obviously making it RNG because it's like, okay, whoever gets the less useful person automatically wins. Ranked as a whole, it's fundamentally changed if it's ever to come back. And other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And that's pretty much it.